Hello, my name is Baptiste Friscourt, representing the debrief. Welcome to the 2024 French Aeronautics and Astronautics Unidentified Aerospace Phenomena International Panel. We have the pleasure of welcoming today Pierre Bescond, former director of the Guyana Space Center, committee member, chair of the Japan Steering Committee. Welcome.
Thank you.
We have also Alain Juillet, former senior intelligence official, former special advisor to the Prime Minister for Economic Intelligence. Welcome. We have by internet Joachim Dekkers, chairman of UAP Coalition Netherlands. Welcome.
Yes, absolutely. I had to unmute my microphone. Sorry for that. Thank you for having me, Baptiste, and all the others. Thank you.
Hello. From Brazil, we have Rony Vernet, electronics and computer engineer and founder of UAP Brazil. Welcome.
Thank you.
From the USA, we have Hoffman, information technology consultant and strategist, and executive board member of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. Welcome.
Good to be here with all of you. Good to see you, Luc, as well.
So we will start with a roundtable about the state of UAP politics across the globe, then discuss some developments that have taken place over the last few months. Let's begin with Japan. House Representative Yoshiharu Asakawa kindly sent us a written statement regarding the situation in Japan. Mr. Asakawa is part of the Japan Innovation Party, member of the Security Committee and Special Committee on Consumer Affairs. He is Vice Chairman of the National Diet Committee and Secretary General of the Kanagawa Restoration Association. Here is a spoken version of his statement.
I was elected to the House of Representatives in October 2021. Since the following year, 2022, I have been asking questions and making proposals in our parliament, the Diet, to the government on the UAP issue, mostly in the context of my standing committees, the Cabinet Committee and the Security Committee. At first, not only the government but also the Japan Innovation Party, to which I belong, did not understand the UAP issue very well. However, the downing of a Chinese reconnaissance balloon in the US in February 2023 and my invitation to a hearing in the Mexican Congress in September 2023 helped increase understanding of the UAP subject within my party. The government was represented by then Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokazu Matsuno, then Defense Minister Yasukazu Hamada, National Public Safety Commission Chairman Satoshi Ninoyu, and Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology Seiko Noda, as well as several cabinet ministers and other officials, including several members of the Japanese government. We have asked several cabinet ministers and deputy ministers about UAP, including then Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology, Seiko Noda. However, the government's interest in UAP was low and remained so even after the Arrow in the US reported on its website that many UAP had been seen and reported in the vicinity of Japan. However, in December 2023, at a meeting of the House of Representatives Security Committee, Defense Minister Minoru Kihara stated, quote, "I myself can fully share the sense of crisis if it turns out the unidentified object is another country's latest weapon or reconnaissance aircraft." End quote. I think this is a very significant step forward for the UAP issue in Japan. However, at present, the government has not announced that it is taking concrete measures against UAP. Therefore, I have decided to launch a bipartisan Diet Members Caucus to appeal more strongly to the government to promote policies against UAP. This is currently being coordinated. We will be calling for the establishment of a dedicated UAP department within the government, among other things. We have already received participation from legislators from across party lines. The Diet Members Caucus is scheduled to be established by the end of this month, and this has not yet been publicized in Japan. This report is a world first. We hope you will all pay attention to it.
So great news from Japan with a new political initiative to look into UAP. A first question to Rich Hoffman. There's been a long-standing alliance between the US and Japan, even though they are not part of the Five Eyes Alliance. Starting in 2020, Japan defense ministers have declared that they were eager to help the US regarding UAP studies. But in the last 4 years, they seem to be more and more reserved on the subject. Do you think increased tensions between the US, China, and Russia will favor UAP investigation due to the increase in surveillance of the airspace? Or do you think it will prevent it due to the increased fear of information leaks?
That's a great question, Baptiste. Let me share with you that I think overall, every country on the planet needs to be concerned about a phenomenon that's not necessarily new, but it's been around for a very, very long time. Every country should be concerned about its, defense of its people, its population. It needs to be looking at the phenomena from a standpoint of understanding what it is, what potential threat that it is, if it is indeed a threat, or if it's not a threat. That should be determined, based upon, using science, if you would, to be able to make that determination. That, the tensions in the world are necessarily not reflective of the fact that the objects that we are seeing in the skies are performing the same kind of maneuvers and capabilities that they did back in the 50s that, that we like to think of are advanced breakthrough technologies or advanced weapons systems now. I mean, you're talking about objects that even back in the 50s were outperforming anything that were in our skies with ease. So, I mean, it just behooves a government, any government on the planet, and considering the fact that objects have been seen in every part of this planet, that they ought to be taking that into consideration and really doing a proper investigation and making a determination as to what they are. Now, we live in a very tense world with obviously the Chinese and the Russian from the standpoint of the United States. We're concerned from the military perspective of, any kind of concerns about for example, the use of anti-satellite technology in space. And we've had, instances of kinematic kind of weaponry that are, possibly by the Russians that were used on a satellite that broke it into many pieces. So, when I was at a conference in, basically in Italy, it was a NATO conference on space and the nature of what laws we should have. How does NATO engage with the United States on this subject? And so there's a larger conversation there because, Europe relies on over 3,000 satellites in it and of itself to be able to maintain its, its communication systems, its own protection and defense and everything else. So it behooves us to be aware of the fact that objects that are being seen in the skies are not just in the skies, they're possibly in space and they're also in water. And we know that from the studies that we're doing, that these are transmedium objects that are, coming about. The balloon incident that we had, with obviously the Chinese, did indeed give a lot of awareness to the fact that, well, wait a minute, you can have a relatively slow object moving into your airspace. You don't know what it is or what its intent is. And so therefore, if you don't know what the intent is and you look at the capability that it's doing, that's in the military context is basically a threat. So we reacted to the fact that we had that. We determined the fact that we also needed to change some of our settings and our configurations for looking at slow moving objects as opposed to fast moving objects, because you can have objects like UAP that are moving relatively slow. So anyway, it's a great question. I think that we need to keep an eye on the fact that we don't know what the Russians are necessarily are working on. We like to think we do. The Chinese are working on in their own secure systems and various other things. And so it just begs every country to be aware of this and to see what we can do to help protect our citizenry.
During the Cold War, there were agreements between the superpowers to prevent false alarms due to UFOs. Do you think such agreements are still valid today, are still active today?
I believe that there's a lot of things that happen over a period of time, and a lot of people forget. A lot of people forget history. I do think that that agreements that were made decades ago, ought to be renewed with a stronger focus. For example, if you look at the fact that we need to really look at the space treaty, the outer space treaty we had back in the 70s, that ultimately that needs to be re-looked at from a change in our history and our cultures over a period of decades, that we need to maybe redefine and renegotiate or re-emphasize these kind of agreements that we've got. So I think that you have a lot of people that I work with in the government. I work in the Army Material Command headquarters here in Huntsville, Alabama. And I will say this much to you, that many of the people that I knew, and I've been with them for like 29 years, have gone and left. And knowledge management in terms of passing on the awareness and the knowledge is always a problem for many people. And the fact that a lot of people, when they do retire or leave, will take with them the understanding of what they did, and it takes a while for the next generation to be able to pick up and to understand what might have been done in the past. The same thing is true with the whole UFO phenomena or UAP phenomena, that ultimately a lot of people are not aware of what's happened back in many, many decades ago, and the fact that the objects back then were doing the same thing that they are now.
Mm-hmm. Luc Dini, Chairman of UAP Technical Committee of the 3AF.
Yes, just to make one comment about your question concerning the treaties in force or not. First of all, there was an agreement, which was a specific agreement between the US and Russia. This agreement was part of different agreements back to 1971, 72, the SALT treaties and so on. And by this agreement, they decided to have a reciprocal information in case of accidental launch. The word unidentified flying object in their airspace was mentioned at that time. I had the opportunity in 2016, with meeting with Russian and so on, to ask questions about this treaty or agreement. And their position was very clear, but with no real link about UFO thing. They just said, we are in a position of disagreement on many treaties. It was about the INF Treaty, it was about the Vienna Convention on Conventional Armament and so on. So they said, this agreement, like others, are obsolete from our perspective. End of story. That's the current situation. But it was not a more global agreement. It was just between the US and Russia.
So let me say that Mr. Hoffman works as an enterprise architect at Redstone Arsenal and the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, as he said. He has over 54 years of experience investigating and researching the UFO subject. Mr. Hoffman has served as Director of Investigations, Staff Team Manager and Director of Strategic Projects, and as the State Director of MUFON. He is now Executive Board Member of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, a group of more than 100 scientists and engineers working to unravel the UAP subject. The SCU holds its yearly conference May 31st to June 2nd. Please tell us what is happening in the US regarding UAP. That just the beginning of that year was incredibly loaded in news.
Sure. Let me also correct you on some. We're now over 300 people in SCU, and also last month was my 60th anniversary with the UFO subject. So I've been at this now. I was able to have my 6th-decade anniversary party. Anyway, I just wanted to share with you a little update on that. Yes, and we do have our conference coming up, and I hope that people can attend. I'm also helping to support that you might not be aware of the Society for UAP Studies. That's with Mike Sifone. I'm also helping UAPX, and we're all trying to work to be able to integrate and work with each other and collaborate. And so that's where I've been trying to help them out, in addition to the board member on SCU. Let me say that, first off, for me, after 6 decades, for the government to come out and say that UAP exists is a major milestone. I mean, after going through Project Blue Book like I did and all the military projects at the Air Force, and to hear all of the, dismissing of cases and debunking them and everything, it was good to hear the government come out and say that UAP do exist and that they're going to now look into it. So that's a thrill. We've also moved into the point where, now you have the situation where, for example, well, I'm a defense contractor, right? And I am now required to basically go and report any case that I might be aware of as even a defense contractor, in addition to the military, in addition to any of the government workers. They now have the capability of going and sending in information, and that's a very encouraging thing, because I've, in my 20 some odd years with the Army Materiel Command, there's been a lot of people who will come up to me very much in quiet and share what they've experienced privately, but now they're doing it more openly. And so we've made major changes and improvements in allowing people to feel comfortable with being able to talk about this subject. And that's a major milestone in and of itself. So there's been a sea change in that culture. The fact that you now have a total government, kind of like looking into this, meaning that it's not just the military that's supposed to be looking into it, it's also the non-military, for example, like NASA, or like, NOAA, the Weather Association organization, or some of the other organizations beyond the military, beyond the intelligence world, and now also into the regular government aspect, all to be able to start sharing their information is very, very encouraging as well, because we've had a lot of people in a lot of those organizations that have not played in on the UAP subject at all. And so for them, there's a huge learning curve about what they need to do and how they need to now react and respond to this government-wide look into the subject. As you very well probably know, we've established, ARROW as a office. It's the all domain, because it's objects in all domains. The anomaly, it's not research, resolution office. So meaning that it's now looking at coming up with resolutions to a lot of the cases that they're receiving, and they are getting quite a number. I have access to what the classified side, and I'm actually seeing conversations with, various organizations and things like that on the classified side, which are giving me an encouragement that they're actually participating. The public might not be aware of that, but I am, because I've got that access. And so to me, again, being kind of like a ufologist, if you would, that's in the government as a contractor, it's very encouraging to be able to see that now they're talking about it more and they're sharing their information, and that's very good. You also have the legislation that's coming out, which is, like, for example, the NDAAs that we have each year for the defense industry, which also then goes and actually puts into law that the requirements for them to respond and report periodically and give updates to congressional leaders. And that's a very exciting thing, because now we're starting to see those congressional hearings. We're starting to see documents where they're doing that kind of study coming forward. And you have lawmakers that are now interested in the subject, are wanting to look into it and more. And they're open about it. They're talking about it. And they're even pushing for legislation. So for me, it's a very, very exciting time to be looking at. You have NASA, who had their study, if you would, looking at the possibility of using NASA technologies to help advance the study. That was also very, very encouraging. And while they came out and pointed that they could play roles as very data curators, or that they could also go and play a role in helping to use potential satellites. And I'm aware that there are now some satellites that they're looking to be able to actually use to help advance the subject and help to collect that information and the data that we need, using calibrated equipment. That's all going to be very, very important to us getting a better understanding of the phenomenon. We've seen a number of reports come out. For example, Sean Kirkpatrick, who has now departed Arrow as the lead, did give out a history report, which I call it the hysterical report because I laugh so much at it. But anyway, it was a situation where, he led and basically was wanting to, state his the claims by David Grush and various other people that there's off-world technology that's being used in defense industries. That didn't pan out. But I can tell you this much: I know too much about the credibility of people, very, very strong, credible people who have given, excellent, they're credible people making incredible claims, the fact that this has happened. And so that's become a U.S. kind of like fascination, if you would, with the general public. And at the same time, now with the legislative actions as well. And so you saw in the recent NDAA that we had in 2024, where there was originally an attempt to be able to go at the defense contractors and have them release any kind of materials that they might have, release any kind of documents that they might have, so that you could basically go and really investigate whether or not we've actually had defense industry partners that were holding materials of alien craft, if you would, and to make that available to the government. Well, that's like eminent domain, and a lot of people have problems with eminent domain, and so that was stricken from the NDAA. And then you basically came up to where we're going to now require all defense organizations to provide documents or any kind of like records that they may have, which will then go to what's called the National Administration for Records or something like that, NARA. And the bottom line is that they will take and help to look through a lot of the documents and see if there is any kind of like classified information that doesn't need to be classified anymore that can be released. So we should see a lot more documents as well, government documents coming forward through that kind of act. And at the same time, we're also, working with the the next draft for that NDAA 2025 legislation to see if we can help get some of that push for open transparency back into the discussion. Hopefully that helps.
Perfect. Great news from the US. Regarding UAP politics, an extraordinary event happened a few years back in Brazil, which organized UAP hearings with worldwide experts. One of the organizers of the event was Rony Vernet. You are electronics and engineer and founder of UAP Brazil. What compelled you to organize such an event? And what was the most challenging aspect of it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Before I respond, I'll give you a brief context about how I dive in this topic. I'm not originally a UFO researcher, never been until 2020. I am currently a manager of digital transformation in Petrobras, which is the biggest oil and gas company in Brazil. And because of my connections in Petrobras, I had access to government documents, Brazilian government documents, about UFOs involving cases in indigenous tribes. And we are not talking about distance, luminous lights, phenomena that we are not certainly, we cannot, you know, have a lot of uncertainty what they are. We are talking about machines, sometimes cylindrical and spherical in different shapes and sizes that descends into the ground, the level of the ground, without no noise, in a blink of an eye, and shot light beams in indigenous people in the middle of Amazon. And in 2020, when I got access to these documents, official documents from Brazil, Federal Police, from the Air Force, Indigenous Nationals Foundation, I was very impressive about what was there. So I got interested and started to research more and more. And because of that, some politicians contacted me, because at that time I was the person in Brazil that was more aware about these documents, documentation. I started to feel a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests to get more and more. And today we have more than 100 pages of documents about this case in Amazon. And as I said, because of that connection with these cases, and because of my connection with Petrobras and credibility and so on, people from, politicians from the Senate of Brazil reached me to help to organize with some researchers this first event in Brazil that was in 2022, where I gave a speech there about this case in Amazon. And it was the first time that the event was held in Brazilian Senate. So it was sponsored by 8 senators in Brazil that are currently very interested in this topic. And these cases in Amazon in Brazil that we presented in that event are causing a lot of worries in the people, in the authorities, in the police and military and politicians, because they are increasing. We had this case in 2000. Last time was 2014, 2016. This happened, affected a lot of indigenous with these light beams, a lot of physiological effects in these indigenous. The police, the military sent people there, but could not explain logically. And we had this case again last year, and it's happening right now in state of Acre, border with Peru. So we are talking about case that happened almost 10 years ago and happened last year and happening right now. So the activity is very, very increasing, and these people are very worried about that. And the indigenous currently right now, I received the information this week. They are asking for help from Brazilian Air Force again. And we know they cannot explain. They will send people. They don't have explanation. They don't have resources in Brazil. Fortunately, in Brazil, we have a few resources, even if we are talking about Amazon, which is a very distant region, very, very remote place in the middle of the forest. And so this is a concept about what was my involvement in, and when Brazilian politicians started to get interested in this case.
And what is the political response now that these cases are increasing?
It's all the same. It's not what I criticize. It's the approach is always in an intelligence way. They don't say they are sending people. We just know about that because people that they're the indigenous leaders are talking with us about that. They send people that are not scientific people. They don't bring scientific equipment. They don't collect data. They just get testimonies. They cannot explain what's happening. They just can say, oh, you don't know the origin. We don't know who is doing that. Maybe it's a test of US, a test of Chinese. We don't know. And they are gone. The people suffer again because it's happening cycles. It happens right now. It happened 2 years. And what I said is urgent because it's happening every year. 2020, 2024, in question of 6 months, it's happening again. And the approach is the same. And I think the approach needs to be changed to be more from intelligence to scientific approach, to collect more data, to try to bring some relief for this population, some explanation, even if we cannot explain the whole picture, maybe some part of it. So, and if we continue in Brazil and the world to use this approach of intelligence, only intelligence, I think intelligence is important, but if we use only the approach of intelligence, we cannot bring relief for the people that is suffering at each cycle of this, I could call unidentified research that is being proceeded there.
And do you foresee any betterment in the situation? Do you think it's possible to launch a scientific study in Brazil?
Yes, but I think it depends a lot of political effort to do that. New laws, for example, we don't have in Brazil any law that instituted that asked for example, our national space studies or scientific universities to research that. I get contact with a lot of researchers because I'm a researcher in physics of the Brazilian Center for Physical Research. But they say, Rony, we don't have the money to do that. We have money for a lot of studies, high energy physics, astronomy, astrophysics, and a lot of that, but not for UAP. So how can we do that without the governmental effort? And unfortunately, in Brazil, we don't have any private institution, like, for example, we have in US that's interested in this topic. So this is the current situation.
Thank you very much, Rony, for your input. More recently, the European Parliament hosted a conference on UAP. One of its organizers is here with us today. Joachim Dekkers, you are chairman of the UAP Coalition Netherlands, an independent, non-profit NGO that represents the interests of all professionals within aviation, armed forces, and police who have experience with unidentified anomalous phenomena. What is the situation regarding UAP in the European Parliament and in the Netherlands?
Great question, Baptiste. It's a really broad question that you're asking, and I can hold a whole presentation just on this. So I will just give you a small update. I will start with the smallest country, which is my own, the Netherlands. Politicians, there are some politicians who are interested in the topic. However, they all remain under radar for at the moment because of two reasons. One, we had the Dutch elections, and they're still forming, because of those results, they're still forming, trying to form a coalition, which is really difficult at the moment. Supposedly something will happen this week, but we never know. So everything is kept quiet under the radar, and there's nobody coming forward on the UAP topic from the political side in our country at the moment. That having said, because there's also the European elections in a few weeks, the Dutch politicians and the rest of the politicians within the European Union are keeping quiet as well, because the UAP topic they think will hurt their reputation, and by that their chance of being elected or re-elected if they're running again. So however, the situation in the Netherlands is really interesting, because you have, for example, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water, which is responsible for aviation safety within the Netherlands. We had a meeting with them, and they are really open to the topic of UAP. They're also taking us as an organization very seriously. We brought some witnesses from the aviation sector, and they also, they were taken really seriously by them. So that's a big win for the UAP topic in the Netherlands. Then we had a meeting with the Ministry of Defense, and the Defense Department is a whole different ballgame because they're not so open as most other organizations within government. But we were taken very seriously. Again, witnesses were taken very seriously, and we have an open line with them as well. With both ministries, we're trying to move forward, but it's slow because they're also waiting for the new coalition. And will they implement new laws or not? So it's not a waiting game at the moment, but things are in slow waters at the moment. One of the interesting things that happened was in the Netherlands we have a Dutch safety board. It's an independent administrative organization recognized by the Dutch government, and what they do is they research big aviation disasters or other disasters where Dutch citizens are involved, and they were one of the biggest organizations to research the MH17 shoot down above Ukraine airspace. Or was it Russian airspace? I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly anymore. But anyway, so we had a meeting with them, and they are really interested in the topic as well from an aviation perspective. So in the Netherlands, politically, it's slow moving at the moment because of all the things going on in the political landscape. But with the other parts of government, things are moving forward, but slow as well. But the most important thing is that they are not so much hung up on stigma anymore because of what they're doing, or what mostly what's happening in the United States and other parts of the world, and because of what we're doing as an organization, because we as UAP Coalition Netherlands, we're approaching this from an aviation safety point. We want to create a safer workspace for professionals in aviation, armed forces, law enforcement, because we're not children anymore. We're grown-ups, and there's something going on, and let the scientists figure out what it is. But before we can find out what it is, we need to have a dialogue about it, and we need to take people who witness these phenomena seriously, and then we can start, gathering data. So that's what we're doing as a coalition in the Netherlands. And well, because the European Union is becoming so much integrated with the rest of the member states, you not only find yourself lobbying in The Hague, which is where our government is seated, but you find yourself traveling to Brussels as well. It's connected, it's intertwined. So the European situation at the moment is that there are politicians and decision makers who are interested, but once again, underneath the radar, they're from various political parties scattered across the European Union, but unfortunately, elections. So everybody is being really careful. The meetings that we have been having in Brussels, every time we were taken very seriously. They approach the topic in a serious manner. And they're concerned about the safe working space for professionals and aviation safety, but also airspace security, because the European Union airspace is, if I'm not mistaken, a little bit bigger than the US or similar to the US airspace. And yeah, but but because it's member states, it works, and we don't have one Department of Defense. We don't have one armed forces. Every country has their own armed forces. Navies, all that. So it's different from the United States. So there's a lot of work to be done there. But as a coalition, we're just taking things slow. And the European Union event was basically organized for all politicians and decision makers and other organizations who are under the umbrella of the European Union, to introduce them to the UAP topic and show them, look, there's something going on that we do not understand. It's also within European airspace, but also in our ocean, or in our seas, in our oceans. It's being seen in space. We're creating, or the European Commission is working on a space law, which was supposed to be released or promoted last month, but we're still waiting on the results on that. So the European Union is trying to catch up, but it's a long process, and therefore we need to build a good foundation for everybody to work with.
Thank you. Great news, amazing results in the Netherlands. Pierre Bescond, as chairman of the steering committee of the French Public UFO Data Collection Group, can you explain to our international audience how cases are treated by your committee after investigation by the GEPAN? And what is France's current political stance on UAP?
This is a vast question. First of all, let me remind you that the board, the GEPAN board, has no power on GEPAN. It can only put forward recommendations to the president of CNES. Now, what is very interesting, though, is that GEPAN was, we thought, one of the first government-built organizations that dealt with UAP, nearly a century ago. Then what was different from, and we thought that not other countries did that. However, and the commission from TPF has very much shown that. We know that most countries have worked on that, except that most of the time it was confidential. Mm-hmm. So if you ask questions, there were no answers. That reminds me of an interesting story with a good friend of mine. We were in the high levels defense studies together in Sefton, and he was at a good level responsible for a military organization in France. And I asked him whether he'd seen or they had cases of UAPs, and he said, no. I knew it was not true, but it was covered by sea. Now, what the GEPAN did, it has only very limited resources. So it cannot do much. And I'm very glad to see that today TPF has created this commission, because it extends the possibilities of working topic. When I took over this presidency of this group, I had an ambition, which was let's try to start collaboration with the other countries in the world, and especially in the US. It turned out that I knew a young guy when he was a bit younger, years back. He was a very brilliant executive in the government. So I went to him and said, look, why don't we start creating some sort of collaboration on UAPs with the government? And I thought he would have been able to really push on the military, on the various parts of the government to do that. And he said to me, and I gave him the Leslie Kean's book so that he could work on that and make his own opinion on what the subject was and how important it was. And his answer was very clear. He said, but Pierre, they was probably the government, the military, I don't know, they will tell us it's secret. So that was years back. So I'm glad to hear from our American friend that today it's less secret. However, from my perspective, I would not even try to start a collaboration today with the US for one particular reason. I'm glad to hear that the Aero has done a good job, but when I read their latest report, I'm very disappointed. And when I read that, and I said, well, you're too harsh. You should not be disappointed. But then I read the report from Chris Mellon on this, which is very critical on the approach of Aero. What he says is that there is nothing. They say exactly what was said 50 years ago with the Blue Book. So coming back to my responsibilities at the board of GEPAN, what I would say is this. GEPAN has very limited resources. So they cannot do more than what they do. And what they have to do is try to solve the questions that are presented by some observers. And that's a very good thing. Population likes it. I mean, at least they're not despair. I mean, they're quite happy that someone is dealing with it. But they cannot go beyond that. So today, with the creation of the commission at AAAF, there is a good collaboration between those two. But however, that does not change the difficulty of the subject, because what the main difficulty is that, and the scientists are pretty clear on that, if you cannot replicate something that you want to study, there's not much you can do. So most scientists would say, well, UOPs are bullshit. They should not say that, because if there's someone that we do not understand, something that we do not understand, then we should work on it. So I'm glad that there is a good collaboration with GEPAN, between GEPAN and the Commission. I'm glad also that our American friends are more openly talking about the situation at the UAP. And one of the best results I believe we have today on the Aero approach is that in France, at least, I don't know in the other countries, but in France, where when you spoke of UAPs, you looked like a weird person. Today, it's no longer the case because the Americans start talking about it. So I'm very glad that the Americans took over and started to discuss it, because that gives the topic of UAP some consistence, and it's becoming to be a serious thing. So this is what I can say. I could go much beyond that with the committee, because when we started this, the GEPAN was in a bad situation. It was it might have been cancelled by some executives of CNES. So then IHDN, the Institute of High Study for Defense, decided that they would work on the topic and make proposals to the government, because they've done this 25 or 30 years before, and they said it was about time they did it again, and that would help GEPAN to be safe. When we did this, we addressed the conclusions of our report to the government, telling them, look, some people believe that it must be the acts of ET, extraterrestrial people. When we look at some of the cases, it might mean that it could be ETs, but we won't argue about this. We don't know. We just don't know. But you, as government members, should be aware that if anything happens at one point that is very serious, you should be briefed on that. So our report goes to you, the government people, so that you be prepared to answer any very difficult questions, including any ET coming onto the ground. But, and what is interesting is that we never had any real good answer from the government, from the political guys. So we stopped at this, but JPON survived, and JPON is still doing a very good job. FFF committee is doing a very good job, and I thank the Americans for the creation of RO. Hopefully, they will answer the critics that are made on this report, and they will help everybody to get together, because that's my final conclusion, which is that we should get together on a worldwide basis to work on the subject. If we do not collaborate on a worldwide basis, there's not much we can do. And especially because what we need more is more observation, more data on the observations. And to do that, we need networks all over the world. So the only way we can have this is by collaborating all over the world.
Perfect. And I feel from the other side of the Atlantic, Rich, starting to boil over, the critics were shared by our American friend regarding the Arrow report. Luc?
Just a small comment about our perception on what is happening in the US. And we had a meeting last November in that room with Chris Mellon, Jacques Vallée, Alain Juillet was there, Pierre was there, and the situation was slightly different. Why? Because having created the Arrow, reports are expected from time to time. And just remember that in 23, many things happen. Okay, a report mainly about the statistics of the observation, the number of UAP explained, unexplained, and so on, was issued in January or early February. I don't remember. Just after you have the balloons event. Okay, so the hunt of UAP is open. Okay, later on, we had to wait for the conference from NASA with participation of Arrow. This conference was very interesting. Why? Because for the first time, they issued some kind of description of the UAPs as they were observed by the US Navy and so on. You had the table with some characteristics. It is what it is, but it was new. And later on, what happened? The audition by the Congress in July. And here, this is a big bang. Why? Because you have the witness of David Rush and others, not only pilots. It was not only a matter of observation on encounter with UAP, it was a matter of hidden program, secret program, materials, equipment, and so on. So this is another, and straight at the end, to the end of the year, the NDA that was mentioned by Rich was under discussion with some hope to have declassification. And this is where the system is paradoxal, if you wish, because it's a matter of declassification of top secret subject, or it looks like. Okay? So they have a contradiction. And what happened after? The system froze, if you wish, even if, and I agree with what Rich said, some good, positive, and forward steps were made. They are there, including something which is very strong, because within Pentagon, decision was made to send orders to the American forces around the world to report systematically any observation of UAP. So that's a fact. But it looks like with the recent report from Aero that people are losing track somewhere or are waiting, there are US elections, so that could explain. So.
I have a spicy question for Pierre Bescond. I have to ask. I will get spanked by the US if I don't. My boss, Mike Hanks from the brief. In the US, former Navy pilot Ryan Graves has testified of Congress that military pilots encountered UAP almost daily. Does the French Air Force or Navy send encounter reports to the JPAN?
That's an interesting question. No, I don't think so. Not from what I remember. No, the way when someone sees something, he goes to the gendarmerie, and then and he makes a report to Japan. Don't think we have many cases of military people.
Thank you.
If I may just make a comment about a possible witness for the force or Navy, the question was about Navy. They are part of the files of the Ministry of Defense and the files that were delivered to Japan. Some old cases that were observed, for example, by the French Navy in Africa. There was a case in Martinica in 65 and so on. So there are some files existing from different places. From the Air Force, that's the same. We know that in the Japan files, there are observations, and tomorrow we'll have a session with pilots, Navy, and Air Force. One saw something in the Navy, but he didn't give a testimony at that time. Another was from the Air Force, and he reported some observation with his crew. So you see, the situation is very depending. And what I can say, having exchanged some views with different pilots sometimes, they say, okay, yes, I saw something. It was surprising. I made a brief to an association of former officer of the French Air Force in air defense and so on, making a presentation. They were welcoming the presentation. They found it interesting. Among them, some said, yes, I saw something one time. But it's not something which is replicated, which is automatic. That's the point.
Last but not least, we have the pleasure of welcoming Alain Juillet, former senior intelligence official, former special advisor to the Prime Minister for Economic Intelligence. Do you think it would be possible for the world superpowers to share information on UAP, or is the rivalry between nations so fierce that they would keep it a secret to maintain a potential technological advantage?
Well, you give the answer to the question. I think it's clear. All the main countries, all the superpower, the UAP, have a real interest on UAP, and why? It's because the engine, the way they fly, the mix, the coverage of the system. Well, everything is interesting because we don't understand how it works, how it has been made, but we know that something is existing. Now it's clear for everybody that something is existing. That's the first point. So when you say that, you understand that for the industry, for the military industry, to get special information on this UAP, which could be used for the improvement of army material, is very, very interesting. So when you get, if you are a superpower, if you get this information, why you will share this information with others, allied or enemies, when through this information you have a special advantage. So that's the problem. And I think that's a problem when Luc was speaking about, the situation, for instance, in the United States, when we see on one side and coverage of a lot of things, information said on a UAP and a lot of testimonies and so on. Okay, but at the same time, you see Gross and the others saying, well, we can say some part of the story, but for the others, it's top secret, and we cannot speak about it. And so that's the problem. We are in a situation in which I think that for the superpower, it's impossible to say the truth. It's possible to share some points, but not too much. And obviously, if it is with enemy, I say, for instance, France and United States with Russia and China, it seems unbelievable for this reason. So, so we are in a problem because on the other side, it is clear, as Pierre said, that collecting data worldwide and exchanging data worldwide is very important to understand the truth, what it is, how it is made, how it works. So that's, for me, it's very clear. We will be in this situation for a long time. The problem now, and that's the problem with the United States, is that if the pressure of the public who are in the know, of some events, these people, the public, looking at these issues, say, oh, we want to know what is really. And so the pressure is so strong, that the government, the politician, or the military are obliged to give a little part of the story in order to cool down, the pressure. And I think that in our country now, coming back on our own country, on my country, in France, the problem is terrible because with Japan and Cometa report, and Pierre knows better than anyone how it has been made. For the politician and for the military, if you speak about UAP, they say, oh, Japan is here and Japan is looking at everything. So no problem, we don't have to be involved in it. So it's a very, very easy way to watch the end and to say, oh, let this story, these issues outside. We don't want to be involved in, okay? That's the first point. Second is that in France, the public is up to now, and through the media, public is not pressuring very much. So there is an interest, but not too much, not too much. So, pressure is not very strong by the public. The experts are working together and exchanging together, no problem on this part, working very well. True, maybe better than in other countries. But for the military, if you look at the French, they don't speak about UAP. Well, we will see, you will see tomorrow with the pilot. Some pilots, some are telling something about, what they have seen in the past. But if you check, it's a very few number of people. And everybody knows that there are other cases on which no news at all, because they stay within the armies, because as said Pierre before, Japan is informed by the territorial organization, guard organization, gendarmerie, but from the army, I don't think there is information coming really with all details, okay? And it's a pity because on the military side now, they have all the capacity in our country as in others. They have a lot of capacities to control, to check, everything about a new UAP event. For instance, radiation, color, heat, everything, speed, and so on. It's possible to get all this information, but we don't have them. I hope, I wish, that the military, on the military side, some people are keeping this information. I want to be sure. I will be very pleased to be sure of it. But it's difficult. Now, just one point, to give you an example. We use satellites, as you know. All around the world we have satellites, and these satellites are able, and around also, are able to measure the size, of the small pieces, of other satellites, everything. about 5 to 10 centimeters. Okay, so if we come back on the UAP, how these satellites are enabled to see UAP, which
Absolutely.
are larger than this little piece. And that's another problem. And it will be very interesting to work on it.
Absolutely.
It is hidden by the military side, possible, or it is part of the story and we have to work on it also. So you see, we have a lot to do, but honestly, in my country, I think that out from Japan and Sigma and some organization, up to now, there is not a real willingness to do something. And on the political side, to end with my speech, on the political side, honestly, the French are very weak. When I see in United States, the Chamber of Representatives, the Senate, when I see in other countries, in Brazil, in other places, well, some politicians are saying, well, we have to do something, you have to check, we create commission and so on. To now, in France, nothing. And that's a problem, because I think that if we want to go forward, to move on these issues, out from the expert pressure, and all our works, it is necessary to see at one day or another, politicians saying, well, now we enter in this issue, and we want to know, and so the pressure starts.
Absolutely. Luc?
Well, I agree with what was said by Alain. Just to complete a little, I think that the subject is always a matter of priorities of the moment, which is a word which is often used in different circumstances. What you say one day may be different from another day. It depends on the moment. So coming to the notion of threat, okay, what is the perception of threat by the forces, generally speaking, and listening to the president, listening to the Minister of Defense, and so on, it's very easy to see what is the mood. The mood is completely characterized by different areas of crisis, and especially Ukraine, where the problem, which is seen and perceived, is a high-intensity scenario with a lot of missiles, UAVs, and so on combined together, which create a threat to the defense, to the people deployed, and so on. So, of course, people are thinking of what is available today, how many ammunitions, and so on. People are talking of a war environment, for industry and so on. This is the priority. They are not feeling, awakened because the problem of UAP. No, I think they are thinking of, what about our forces, our air force, and so on. So the priority is not there at all. In the US, it's different because the Pandora box was open, okay, for different reasons, and we don't come back on that. And the pressure through the Congress and so on is heavier. So the perspective is not at all the same. And I think that Joachim Dekkers probably will confirm. He said very clearly that some politicians are interested, however, looking at people at the Ministry of Defense and so on, they probably answer, we have plans, we have priorities, we have budget and so on, and UAP is not on the table. That's another perception of the.
You remember some words said by a French officer of the Air Force, a friend of mine. I was speaking about UAP and saying, well, but for the Air Force, it's a real problem because you don't know how to stop it. So it's a real threat for the French security, in the airspace security. And he said, yes, you're right, but they are not aggressive. They have never attacked something. So it's not a problem of priority.
Absolutely. We almost exhausted the allocated time, so To conclude, I will offer you a question and we will do a roundtable of answer. So there is an initiative in Europe. Paolo Guezzardi is trying to have a UFO conference that is organized yearly in a small state called San Marino. And he wants that conference to be under the protection of the United Nations. Do you think it would be a good idea to break the ice with the institutions? And let's start with Rich.
Without a doubt. I think that, we need to be able to, let me say something that was mentioned by the gentleman sitting to your right, and that is that ultimately we have a situation where if the military and the intelligence community, doesn't want to, our politicians want to keep it back. They're concerned about the stigma, right? I'm going to be embarrassed if I talk about UFOs or whatever like that. Then you've got to tackle it from another aspect, tackle it from academia, and have academia push the topic and the narrative down and educate the public, who then can get the pressure to the politicians to actually engage in the topic properly. And I think, you have to look for a trusted source, and that the trusted source can be academia. And that's what we're trying to tackle here is we need to get more academia, and they're starting to actually come on to this whole topic. And they're starting to help to drive the narrative in the media that then educates and informs the public. Now the public can put the pressure on the politicians and get that happen. So I just want to bring that up. As far as the initiative in San Marino is concerned, I think very clearly that this belongs also in the UN. I think the UN needs to be engaging the topic. It is a global concern. Whether you want to treat it as being objects from outer space or a defense position, you need to be concerned because it's a phenomenon that's global, and it's impacting all of us, and it has impacted us over a long period of time. Rony Vernet talked about the one incident. What about the Colares incident that happened in Colares, Brazil, back in the 70s, where people were being attacked by objects, and so we need to understand that. So it's a phenomena that we need to really finally tackle. I think we need to do it globally. I think we need to collaborate more, and this is a great forum, by the way. And I appreciate the fact that you're doing this. And we need to have more of these conversations as opposed to less, and to break the ice. And I think that organizations like SCU, for example, and there are many others, that are starting to form, are helping to educate the public about the topic. And we need to do that and to really spearhead this push. But I do agree. I think the UN needs to be involved in it, and it should have been involved a long time ago. We attempted to try to do that. Jacques Vallée tried to do that back in the early days with Grenada, and it didn't get very far. And so Eric Gary was trying to work with that. I think that we need to have a renewed effort of making that happen. And if San Marino does or doesn't happen or whatever, I think that we need to keep pushing. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rich. Rony, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think any type of collaboration between countries, and this initiative of Project Titan that's bringing the topic to the UN would be very valuable to establish a baseline for all the countries about what's happening in the world. We have this case involving military in US every day, as you said. We have a lot of tragic and hostile, and intent is something that's interpreted, but we interpreted it that we have attacks in Brazil against people because people is being affected by physiological effects, sometimes some permanent sequela, permanent damage. So I think bringing this to a forum like United Nations would establish this baseline and start the collaboration. For example, as Rich said, we have in this case in Amazon at least since 77, and it happens until today. And Brazil alone was not able to do anything about that, to respond that, to explain, to bring relief to the populations. Maybe doing this collaboration, bring, for example, SCU, UEPX, organizations from France, or governmental corporations. We could bring some academia, some more intelligence, some scientists to Brazil to help us to figure out what's happening. So I think any initiative of cooperation is very valuable for us and for the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Dekkers, do you think we should contact the United Nations?
Absolutely. I do not know much about the initiative from San Marino, so I cannot really comment on that. But I do think that some countries within the European Union, at least one, which is San Marino at the moment, but once again, I do not know the details on their initiative. It should be put on the agenda of the United Nations, and whether it's coming from the United States or Brazil or somewhere in the European Union or Australia or any other country for that matter. What I found out about the UAP topic, because I didn't know anything about it, I'm the little kid on the block right here, because all of you are much more experienced on this than I am. But what I found out was that it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's a worldwide situation. And regarding UAP, we need to stop thinking in borders. Because from when I speak to professionals within, law enforcement, armed forces, or aviation, it's like the wind. The wind doesn't stop at a border, or the rain doesn't stop. It's a global thing, and the UAP topic is the same as well. So we need to have it eventually being discussed within the United Nations. I didn't know that it already happened in the past. So after this conference, I'm going to look into it, because I'm really interested in finding out more and what happened afterwards. But yeah, let's see what we can do towards the United Nations as a worldwide. Yeah, I don't know how to exactly say it in English, but as an initiative to see what happens, not necessarily from San Marino by themselves, but other countries as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bescond, what's your opinion?
Remind me, the question was?
So there is an initiative in San Marino, a small state in Italy.
Okay, and what for the United Nations? Yes, I do believe, as our American friend, that the United Nations should take over that question. And especially because they're above all political initiatives. So it's a nice place to get together all people involved in UAPs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Luc?
Well, I think that United Nations is certainly a place to share information and to suggest initiatives which belong, at the end of the day, to the nations themselves. I think that ONUSA was not in charge of this, but had specific missions. And looking at the UAP story is probably something interesting. By the way, there was an initiative which started around 2010 or maybe a little bit later. Some questions raised about what we call the planetary defense. The problem was not UAP, the problem was asteroid. And it was pushed by the Russian, by the way. Okay, this one, Mr. Rogozin. Okay, then of course it collapsed. And certainly there is an option to deliver information and see a reaction of people. But at the end, as I said, one very important thing is the availability of data, not only of future data, not only of today's, but data from the past, which are probably in some places completely locked, and that could be very useful for the scientists to investigate and try to understand better what is happening.
And for the audience, the ONUSA is the Office of Space Affairs inside the United Nations. Alain?
As the others, I think it's a good idea. First of all, because I would say a worldwide data collection, collection from everywhere, despite the fact that it will be partly of the data, because as I've said before, I know the big countries will not exchange part of the data, but globally, it will be a huge amount of data, and it will allow to equalize the knowledge in all places. I think that's a very, very important first step, to equalize the knowledge. And second, I think it will open the eyes of the politicians. I come back on the politicians. It will open their eyes, understand, and that will enforce the military to give answers. So, so I think it will be a good way to move on with all the system. So I'm impressed.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody, for your presence and your brilliant answers to my tough questions. I did not hold back. I can testify that. It has been an absolute pleasure. I crushed my time. Well, I crushed my time. But thank you very much again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for your participation. Thanks a lot for your time. And thank you to SCU for the long-standing cooperation we have. It's nearly 10 years, I think, since the very first time we discussed maybe on Aquadia this moment. And we will continue to exchange views and analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Luc, and it's been a great partnership. Out here, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.